Major breaking news out of the United States Supreme Court. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito has entered an order granting an administrative stay until August 4th, which effectively freezes the lower court's decision to conclude that the ATF's quote-unquote ghost gun rules are illegal and unconstitutional. Essentially, those ghost gun rules are now in effect until August 4th. But don't worry about it. We're going to talk about what it really means in the real world in 1 second. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the 4Box, a diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar, and author of the brand new best-selling book, Disarm: What the Ukraine War Teaches Americans About the Right to Bear Arms. Okay, folks. So, yesterday's video, I explained that the Solicitor General's Office of the Department of Justice, the Solicitor General's Office of Joe Biden, which is the office within the Department of Justice that handles all the matters before the United States Supreme Court, they filed an emergency application seeking to stay the decision by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals out of New Orleans in Texas and the lower court decision, the district court decision, that had both concluded that the ATF's broadening of the definition of frames and receivers, i.e. ghost guns according to the propaganda term of the Biden administration, that their conclusion that this was illegal should be stayed, which means paused. So the emergency application was made to the U.S. Supreme Court, trying to freeze the lower court cases that were, frankly, in favor of the Second Amendment and in favor of the anti-Biden position, if you will. So now the Supreme Court has looked at this, specifically Sam Alito, Justice Alito, who's responsible for appeals that come out of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. He is granted what is known as an administrative stay. Now, I know there's some people on the internet, Twitter and YouTube, whose hair is now on fire out of fear that this bodes poorly for the Second Amendment and for the future of this ghost gun rule, specifically that it may actually go into effect. Do not panic. This is not true. I want to explain something here so you'll all sleep soundly. And that is this. To begin with, there's two aspects of law. There's procedure, which is the process in which a case moves through the court system, and then there's the substance. In the context of the Second Amendment, what is the Second Amendment? What does it mean? How does it apply? And what gun control law should be struck down under the Second Amendment? That's substantive. This discussion today is about the process, because this is what this is all about. Because at the end of the day, this decision by Justice Alito to grant the administrative stay in favor of the Biden administration is really pro forma. This is as routine as it gets in the U.S. Supreme Court. Why is that? When the applicant that seeks an administrative stay of a lower court decision that has ruled that some aspect of federal law, whether it be a federal statute or a federal regulation, in this case dealing with this ghost regulation, is what we're talking about. The U.S. Supreme Court, when the government asks them, will almost always automatically grant a temporary stay of the lower court's decision to give the United States government, in this case, in the form of the Solicitor General's Office in the Department of Justice, the courtesy, if you will, of a week or so to let the Supreme Court as a whole look at the details to see who's right and who's wrong. So this order by Justice Alito to stay the lower court decisions in our favor should not be taken as a good or a bad or any kind of indication of anything on the merits of this question. It should be viewed as this is what one would expect in an emergency appeal, an emergency application by the United States government brought by the Solicitor General's Office of the Department of Justice. This is routine. Okay. So the other thing to keep in mind as to why I don't want you to panic is if you look at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, they also granted an administrative stay of the district court ruling in our favor. And if you actually look at the calendar, and I'm the only one geeky enough to do this, the truth is the 10-day administrative stay entered effectively against us, not had anything to do with just procedurally, was to expire next Thursday, August 3rd, by my back of the napkin math. So Justice Alito's administrative stay by the U.S. Supreme Court expires at the end of the day on Friday, August 4th. So really, this decision by Justice Alito actually only extends the administrative stay that was already in place 24 hours. So not a big deal. And again, none of this has anything to do with the merits of the matter. It's simply allowing the parties to litigate. Now, I will also say when the government asks for these applications, 99.9% of the time, I would guess, the Supreme Court wants to at least hear from the other side. And in this case, Justice Alito says he wants to hear from the plaintiffs, the Second Amendment plaintiffs, if you will, challenging the ghost gun regulations. He wants to hear any briefs by them by Wednesday, August 2nd by 5 p.m. So to summarize, what's happening here procedurally is that the Federal District Court in the Northern District of Texas found that the Joe Biden ghost gun regulation violated federal law because it exceeded the scope of its authority that was given to it by Congress. And the way it did this, it expanded the definition of what is a firearm beyond the statutory definition. And an administrative agency cannot do that. If they want to expand the definition of, let's say, firearm, they have to go to Congress to do that. So the district court said that's not allowed. And then it did something called vacatur or vacate. It then entered an order of vacatur or to vacate the regulation, which basically made it null and void, as if it never existed. Then it went to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The federal government says, please, oh, please stay the order of vacatur. And the Fifth Circuit said, for all intents and purposes, we're not going to do that with respect to the essence of this dispute over, meaning the definitions that ATF was trying to expand beyond the scope of the statute. So then the Fifth Circuit says, we're going to rule against you, government. We're going to give you 10 days of an administrative stay of our order, allowing you to go to the Supreme Court if you wish. The Department of Justice, through the Solicitor General's office, which again is full of a bunch of Supreme Court litigators, many of whom clerk for the Supreme Court, they again sought the administrative stay to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that stay was granted, effectively only giving them an additional day of the stay beyond what the Fifth Circuit had already entered and granted. And the question now is, when the Supreme Court resolves this, whether or not they will allow the Fifth Circuit's Court of Appeals decision to uphold the vacatur or the vacation order decided by the district court pending the appeal or not. Only time will tell. But the bottom line is, do not let anyone freak out on this. No guarantees that we win or lose or anything, but the fact that Justice Alito entered this order should not be viewed as any kind of huge problem for us. It's just part of the process. And again, we're going to keep you up to speed. This is a very big deal. It's very important that we win this in the Supreme Court as I see it, and I suspect we will, but we're going to have to let this play out a week or so, and we'll see what happens. Okay, folks, hope you learned something here today at the Four Boxes Diner. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. We'll see you again soon at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.